here's what happens. This is what happens in 2020, and this is why it's important. This is the zodiac belt. Zodiac belt, zodiac belt. That means the constellations are out here in space. In other words, what we see from Earth, when we look, let's say this direction, although we know in space there's no directions, is the constellation of Capricorn. For our purposes, we want Capricorn here tonight at a cardinal point. Aries would be here, Libra would be here, Cancer would be here. And the reason I want to do this is because I want to show you what's going to happen in 2020. There's going to be something called a Saturn-Pluto conjunction in Capricorn. Again, from our position on Earth, they're going to look like they're in this exact same space. It's going to be joined by Jupiter, and at one point during that year, 2020, it'll also be joined by Mars. That's a lot. Yeah. William Scott's just got really big. So, why is this important? Saturn is the planet of time. It used to be, until they discovered Uranus, the edge of the known universe. And then we added in Uranus, who I blocked out because I didn't want you to get confused, and Neptune. But Saturn is limitation. It was known as the limit of our solar system. It is brittle. It's inhibiting. It can be judgmental, because it is the principle of discernment. It's the ability to see the flaw. It's the ability to see what needs to be learned next, so it's also a teacher. And we dread it when we don't want to be controlled, and we love it when we get older and we're looking for some limits and understanding. It's a very interesting thing. So Saturn just entered Capricorn in December of 2017, and it's slowly making its way to join Pluto. We know what Pluto is. Pluto is the principle of death and rebirth. Saturn is the lord of karma. And when they get together, it is stasis and shift, sharing the same space. Other times in history that we are familiar with that these two have been together and formed a conjunction. 1914 to 1915, they were conjunct in Cancer. It was the start of World War I. So everybody knows the moon has 4 phases, right? The moon has new moon, the quarter moon, the full moon, the waning moon. In the new moon, you start new things. It's the time that's most potent and fertile for new beginnings. In this first quarter moon, or the waxing moon, is when you look and see, farmers who garden with this under the influence of the moon. Oh, how are my little plants doing in this stage? The full moon illuminates the entire garden. It shows you what you've grown. And then in the third phase, the waning moon, you look at the garden, you think, okay, I need to till this row under, I need to put some fertilizer over here, and so forth. This happens every month, and the people who follow lunar cycles would have a lot more to say about it than I do. But to give you an idea that everything that happens astrologically happens in a cycle. So if I say Saturn and Pluto were conjunct at the start of World War I in Cancer, it went into a square to Pluto, and then it went into an opposition. So the opposition in that cycle was in 1931, and 1932 and 33 were the worst years of the Depression. Okay, again, stasis, dynamic change. Authenticity, failure to change. Need to control. Pluto wants to win. Okay. The next one was 1946, 1947, Saturn and Pluto were conjunct. Some people here have this in their chart. And this is when we get Israel-Palestine and the conflict comes to full manifestation. India and Pakistan. The NSA and the CIA are formed under Pluto-Saturn. And for the UFO people who are listening, Roswell happens in 1947. So we love that because it's an expansion of something. The opposition in that cycle was 1965 to 1966. What's different about this cycle is that Uranus is in conjunction to Pluto, and you get revolution as the bigger signature than the dissolution. Okay? Because Uranus is, for those of you who don't know, the Che Guevara of the astral world. It's the provocateur, the instigator, the revolutionary, and it's whispering in Pluto's ear, and of course, you get the hippies. You get all sorts of things that happen in that particular cycle, and you get really the birth of ecology, because Pluto and Uranus are conjunct in Virgo. They're opposed by Saturn in Pisces, and Virgo is the sign where we recognize the interconnectedness of things. So you've got these two potent forces of revolution in the sign of ecology, opposed by Saturn, and you have a dynamic shift that takes place in those years. The next one that happened, remember that's the midpoint, that's the opposition. The next conjunction is 1982. We have Reagan. Now we have the conjunction in Libra. Some of the people who were in the room were born at that time. And this is, interestingly, the Iran-Iraq war, which comes back to haunt us at the opposition between Saturn and Pluto, which is 9/11. It was a Saturn-Pluto opposition. And also the dot-com bomb, the failure, the collapse. So now we're moving to another one in 2020. We have another one in Capricorn. Capricorn is corporations, authoritarian figures, rules and regulations, governments, and we have these two planets moving into place in 2020. Okay. That would be enough for us all to go, okay, oi, is there another planet we can move to? And I would be heading up that spaceship. But that's not all that's happening. We also, this year, we have Uranus, our pal, the revolutionary, is changing signs. It's moving into Taurus. Taurus is in the room? Okay, going to have a lot of changes for the next 7 years. So again, going back to the how do you use the Saturn-Pluto conjunction for your good, for the greatest good. It's a matter of perception. So, Uranus is the second reason why I'm an astrologer, because it's a magic trick. And when I read somebody's chart and I know it's the right birth time, I can look at Uranus transits and go, oh, did that happen to you at that time? And they're like, how did you know that? Because it's a Uranus aspect, and Uranus makes a dynamic impact whenever it touches a planet. So, it moved, in 2008, it went opposition to Saturn, which is the dissolution of the status quo, it's the signature for that. Not only did we get President Obama, who was certainly the dissolution of the status quo, but we also got a recession that dissolved almost everything, okay? Then Uranus was in Pisces at that point. Uranus moved into Aries, and on March 11, 2011, Uranus moved finally from Pisces to Aries, and a big tidal wave, Pisces is a water sign, a big tidal wave went and hit Japan and Fukushima, and a nuclear fire has been burning ever since. Uranus is uranium. So I looked at that and went, yeah, so how do we figure out what's going to happen when Uranus goes from fire, Aries, I may not have mentioned that, but fire into Earth, because Taurus is an Earth sign. So what happens this year on May 15th is the planet of greatest revolution is moving into an Earth sign. Now it's not going to just stay there right away. It's going to retrograde back to Aries on November 6th, and then on March 6th it's going to come completely into Taurus. What can we expect? something. Now, I would think that the one thing all the politicians of the world haven't really counted on is the Earth having a voice of her own. And Taurus is an Earth sign. And Uranus is a way of speaking, because it is always throwing its lightning bolts of illumination into places that are stagnant. And certainly the state of the Earth right now should be at the top of our list of what needs taken care of. Anybody here who has children must have the anxiety that their children are going to have a planet in the next 50 years, because certainly that is an issue. Will there be water to drink or air to breathe? I mean, the rest of us will be alive by then, but maybe we don't have the same concerns for ourselves. I don't know. But certainly one of the things that I'm always astounded by is people who are denying that the Earth needs help all have children. And you think, why aren't they concerned about what their children are going to inherit? It's a sort of disconnect that doesn't make any sense. I think when Uranus goes into Taurus, we may have big Earth events. There may be a volcanic eruption. This is fire into Earth, right? Aries into Earth. Nobody expected Mount St. Helens, for sure. And we may have earthquakes in other places. Certainly all the fracking that's going on could coalesce into something that would be difficult to handle. The interesting thing about Aries is it's the sign of individuation. Uranus is a symbol for community. So if you look back on the last 7 years of Uranus and Aries, there have been a lot of individuals joining together with a passion and fire. Right? And now it's moving into, Uranus is moving into the sign of resources, the sign of money. And this is why the second thing that I listed when I started was a revolution of values needs to take place over the next 7 years. A lot of financial astrologers are speculating as to whether the banks will fail, whether the stock market will tank. I've read a lot of them, and I don't think anybody knows, to tell you the truth. There's one who says if we're going to see anything, it'll be after the Saturn-Pluto conjunction, because that's the big shift that we're moving towards. Uranus is not in contact with Saturn and Pluto. It's a purely their show. But Jupiter is in contact with them. Going back to this chart, Jupiter is going to be there. And Saturn-Jupiter conjunctions are traditionally seen as a change of regime. So the Arab astronomers that we owe much of our Western civilization to were very intrigued by the idea of Saturn-Jupiter conjunctions. Remember, Saturn was the outermost planet that they could see. Jupiter is a planet of good fortune, and they certainly, there are many astrologers who think that the star of the Magi at Jesus' birth was a Saturn-Jupiter conjunction that you could see in the sky, and that it indicated a new regime. And these ancient astronomers attributed this conjunction to a 1,000-year cycle. So one of the ideas that we have this, like, what was it, 1999, what was it, Y2K, right, was in keeping with this idea that every 1,000 years the world falls apart. That's what happens, okay, the modern version. So, we are coming to one of those conjunctions. And it's going to be on December 21st, 2020. And they're going to be conjunct at 0 degrees Aquarius. So that means that they're moving into air signs where they haven't been for about 960 years. We're going to have one at 0 degrees Aquarius. Why is that important? Because at about 2 o'clock in the morning on election night in 2016, Mars changed signs and went to 0 Aquarius. And Michael Luton, who's an incredibly good astrologer, and you can look him up if you want to, and I think it's a great thing to do, had made a prediction that Hillary wouldn't win because of that shift, because it's a precursor to what's happening in December of 2020. So 2020 is it's a chord that gets struck, and much like the chord in the Beatles song A Day in the Life, which was written under a Pluto-Uranus conjunction opposite Saturn, right? Much like that chord that kind of sustains forever, this year, 2020, is going to sustain for a long time, right into the Pluto return of the United States, which will happen in 2022. So that's why this year is important, and that's why next year is important, and that's why the year after that is important. And that's why we are thinking of the 3 things that we want to take away from this. I'm just kidding. The idea of a Pluto return is it is an opportunity to look at what's wrong and to do something about it. You know, it's interesting for me being back in the United States, having not been barraged by television about the administration, only what I could read in the newspaper and gather online, to see how much is roiling in everyone. It's really sort of amazing to see that everything we always sort of knew was wrong, but just kind of was tucked under there a little bit. There's no tucking it anywhere. The idea that the news was giving us a certain point of view, we all sort of knew it, and we picked which newscaster we wanted to look at the most, or which channel we thought was giving us the least propaganda, but we all sort of knew that there was something wrong. We weren't just getting the facts, right? And to be back here and to see all of that on the surface of the skin is really an amazing experience. But we will not be able to, nothing will stay the same. So you need to be prepared. The reason I say get out of debt is one of the most important things to do during this time is because Uranus is going to revolutionize resources. Now, we may wind up pooling resources in ways that we never dreamed of before. You may find that it's much easier to form a shared interest company with people without going through the rigmarole that you might have to go through because the banks are suddenly, I'm making this up, but you may find that the ways of doing business are going to change. That resources will change, and so it's very important to know what it is that matters to you. Nobody ever died thinking, "I wish I made more money." It's just not how it happens. Now the idea that we need money to support our families, to have a good life, and all of that is a given. But what I'm saying is that that's not at the end of a life. What we're going to be most concerned about is how much we have in here. And I used to say this to my students at Hunter, and they would be like, "Oh my God, who's this woman?" But David Geffen once said, if you're thinking that money is going to solve your problems, you're not making enough money. And yeah, it's going to solve the immediate survival need. But if you're thinking it's going to make you a better you, it's not going to. And that's part of what Uranus and Taurus is going to teach a lot of people. And that's an important point. If we take the best properties of Uranus, it is about community. So think about a cooperative. I'll always remember the line in It's a Wonderful Life when the Jimmy Stewart character, what's his name? George Bailey,
Yeah.
is trying to explain how his is a credit union and that everybody's money is in somebody else's house or farm or car or store. And the beauty of that was really beautiful because everyone was really helping each other and they didn't even know it. And I think that we're going to reach a crisis with banking because the banks didn't change anything after their bailout. And that people are going to start to, I don't think Bitcoins are the answer, but Bitcoin is an idea that you can fund things outside of the existing banking system. And I think that's what's important for people to realize. And I think there'll be people who go, okay, let's form a co-op that is not just, the co-op where you get your granola and, all of that, which is how the 60s people are used to thinking of co-ops. But really form a cooperative bank, a credit union. I think more businesses will be like that. They'll be safer. I mean, banks already have negative interest rates. Do you know this? I mean, there are some banks that are charging you interest to hold your money. And also, we think of money as our only resource. We are our greatest resource. We are spirits in the material world. We inhabit a body. And we have fine minds, and we have big hearts, and we have the capacity to love. And that's a resource. We don't think about it that way, but it's definitely a resource. And nothing is going to be the same after the Saturn-Pluto conjunction. So you want to think, well, what do I want it to be? That's why I'm saying you have to marry your intention with your action. What do I want my life to be when the planet of form is sharing the same space with the planet of transformation in a sign that allows things to come into their essence? Because Capricorn is a sign that strips away anything that's superfluous. It's the bones of things. It's how we get to the essence of something. And that's where we're at right now. And again, along that spiral of time, this one, right? We're going through the same changes we went through before, but we're not exactly in the same place in our moving universe. So we have great creative options to make different choices. And that's what I think is really important about this time. Even if you feel as if you have no agency, it's not true. We all have agency. And sometimes the big Capricornian machine of government makes us think that we don't, but we do. It's just a matter of the 98% of us who aren't hungry ghosts recognizing that we have the power. It's interesting to me that while the Christians and the Jews and the Muslims have been fighting each other, right? The Buddhists have been silently winning the religious war because now there's mindfulness everything. There's mindfulness brushing your teeth, there's mindfulness going to bed, there's mindfulness everything. And it's so they very quietly just subverted the whole idea of meditation and made it part of daily life. So all the people who are doing yoga as an aerobic exercise are still doing yoga. And eventually that has reaches critical mass, so that all of those, namastes come home to roost in a good attitude. But it's happening very slowly with individuals, and we don't see that as much. And when Uranus and, Saturn and Jupiter move into Aquarius, that's going to be a very interesting creative time. Because Aquarius is known for its innovation, its invention, its ability to create something new, to think about something different, and it's also community. It's where we come together and we join with each other. So a lot of people, I read somebody wrote me a letter a couple of months ago saying that, well, we know that the Aquarian age started in 1997. I was like, really? Do we know this? How do we know this? And she had a couple of books that said that's when it started. I was like, okay, that's what started for that person. But I was thinking about it, and I was thinking that if we're going to see that utopian, this is the dawning of the age of Aquarius, we may start to see that happen in the 20 years after that conjunction. We still have to get through a Pluto return, and then Pluto will move into Aquarius. And it will move in and start a whole new cycle. And the United States is going to have a Pluto return on February 20th, 2020.